Today on the Dennis Michael Lynch Show, we're going to speak to Dinesh D'Souza. We're going to speak about everything from Israel, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, the conservative division. Can we get that back? Trump in the midterms, Israel, a lot to talk about, and his filmmaking. What a story. So get ready, because it's all unfiltered.
Dennis Michael Lynch gives you his word, and he will never let you down. He will always fight for America.
The only one who really puts his money where his mouth is Dennis Michael Lynch.
I'm Dennis Michael Lynch, and I thank you for joining me today. Dinesh D'Souza, the filmmaker, the writer, the influencer. Is that the name we're giving people nowadays, right, who have big social followings? He's going to join me in a second. We're going to talk about a lot of great things. Excellent interview. You're going to really like it. With that said, it is Friday, and I'm going to ask you, please, if you don't mind, please go to TeamDML.com. Consider being a member. The way that I am able to keep the lights on and give my staff a living salary and be able to get all these excellent interviews and shows to you is through our membership. So it's only $20 for the entire year. You get every piece of content we put out, plus extras, live chat, you name it. The $20 is the base membership, but it gives you every piece of content. Then we've got a little step up if you're a DML CBD buyer. And then we've got a big membership for people who want to get themselves free bottles of Miracle Me body oil. But for the most part, the $20 membership is there for you. It doesn't cost a lot, but believe me when I tell you, it makes all the difference to us. So without further ado, after you go to teamdml.com, here is Dinesh D'Souza. Dinesh, it's great to see you. I was just on your show a couple of weeks ago, and now you're reciprocating, and I appreciate that. And I want to start off right away by saying that I watched The Dragon's Prophecy, and I started to tear up. The very beginning of that film is so freaking powerful. And all I could think to myself is, man, I really want to sit in a room with somebody like Tucker Carlson and have him watch this and say, go ahead, you still got something to say? I mean, how did you get your hands on all of that October 7 footage?
You know, right after October 7th, my wife spotted a couple of these videos that, of course, had been recorded by the attackers. They're recorded from the Hamas side, but they had been live streamed, and that's how people were able to capture them. And she's like, take a look at this. And I was like, wow. And then she joined a Telegram channel where people were uploading these videos over, by the way, a period of 2 years. And so I became very familiar with the footage, and I noticed that it was not kind of getting out. Really strange, right? This is riveting footage. And we live in an age of social media, and yet the world has not seen it. And so part of the reason, by the way, was the Israeli government was a little worried about the sensibilities of the hostage families, so they decided not to put it out. But I had it. And some of it, by the way, I had to leave out. It's too much. But I said to myself, you know what? I'm seeing these clips from Gaza, a starving kid over here, someone walking through the rubble. No one has seen the originating attack. That's what got all of this started. So that's a natural way to begin the film. And but it's just to tell you a little anecdote. We uploaded the film into the Angel Studios platform, where the audience, or a segment of the audience, rates the film. And we're checking the ratings, and I noticed the film is getting kind of low ratings. And the reason is, we look at the comments, people are getting freaked out by the footage. It's a bit of a kind of family-friendly type of audience. And in one of the opening scenes, as you know, one of these Hamas attackers is approaching a kibbutz. A dog comes out of the front door. They blow away the dog. That's in the film. Yes. And so these guys were like, I can't see this. I'm out of here. So what we did was, for Angel Studios, we actually softened the opening footage, re-uploaded the film, the ratings soared. So there's actually a kind of, you could call it a PG version of the film on the Angel Studios platform, but you've seen the normal version, the real film, which is intended to be a bit of a heart stopper, at least in the opening 10 minutes.
I can tell you that if that was your objective, you, as a fellow filmmaker, you nailed it. For me, the visuals of seeing the dog shot at the beginning, very difficult. because of the dog's so innocent, right? And so the dog gets shot, and then hearing the people and seeing the people hiding, and I mean, you really, as a filmmaker, you did a remarkable job in terms of your editing and your timing to make me, the viewer, feel as if I was there and watching this in real time. The one that got me to where Dinesh, I had to go and rewind because it paused me. I couldn't concentrate. Was there is one visual of two people burnt to death in their car. Is that one that you took out of the PG version?
It is to me, such an iconic image. You just see two blackened skeletons in a car. And to me, that is if I had to pick a single iconic shot, cover of Time magazine shot that captures October 7th, for me, that would be it. Here's something interesting. You might remember the conversation I have outside a kibbutz with this young mom, Lishai Miran. And her husband, Omri Miran, was a captive in Gaza, happily now back and reunited with his family. But we had this footage, as I mentioned, of the Hamas attacks. And so I'm talking to Lisha Miran out in her front porch or in the front yard. And she's describing, these Hamas monsters coming through the window. And I'm hiding, my husband and I run to our safe room and I'm holding my baby. And after this conversation, my wife comes up to me and she says, we have this exact footage. I mean, think about it. Normally, as a documentary filmmaker, you know this as well as I do. If somebody's telling a harrowing scene about a home invasion, you have to go recreate it. You have to get actors. They've got to make people feel like they're really there. But in this case, and think about it, the Hamas attacked 19 kibbutzes. We did not have footage of 19 kibbutzes. We had footage of 2 kibbutzes, but one of them happened to be this one, the Nahal Oz kibbutz. So I was in the very, fortunate is an odd word to use in this context, but I was fortunate as a filmmaker to have the very scene that the woman is talking about. So I can put you right at the scene of the crime. This is not a recreation. This is the real thing.
Dinesh, it's amazing, because I'm sure you're like me, man. If I sit down and I watch a movie on Netflix, even if it's not a documentary, even if it's just a narrative, a theatrical, I'm watching cuts. I'm watching what they cut to and away from. I could usually pick out the lack of continuity. You do that too. You probably can't watch a film normally anymore, right? I will tell you that you pulled me out of that filmmaker mode. I really watched that as a person who, I'm describing it, has their popcorn and their soda to say, I'm sitting here and I'm watching. I couldn't eat and drink anymore. That's how powerful it is. So before we get deeper into a conversation, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening now with the anti-Jew sentiment that's going all around the place. But I really want to have the majority of this interview to talk about you and your filmmaking and how that's all come up, because everybody's going to hear the normal stuff that goes back and forth. And I know my audience would love to hear this because they're huge fans of yours. But sticking to this for a second, where can people go to see that film?
So the film is now on a bunch of different platforms. The easiest way is Apple iTunes. I mean, it's on Apple TV. You can watch it there. Probably the easiest way for people to watch it. It's also available on Rumble. It's available on the Salem Now channel, salemnow.com. The website for the film is thedragonsprophecyfilm.com. DVDs, Amazon, DVDs available at walmart.com. So that's a good way also to own the film and share the film. And I know there is a bunch of these Christian groups that have bought a lot of DVDs and distributed them. The film is an interesting project for me because my earlier films have been in one way or another all about the meaning of America. And their content has been political and historical. In this one, there is a kind of intersection of archaeology and history and politics, but also theology. So it is essentially politics meets the Bible. And I've never taken on a project of this magnitude that somehow also moves into the kind of archaeological and even scriptural terrain.
Have you ever been to Israel prior to making this film?
Yes, my wife and I went for the first time at the end of 2022, but even that's pretty recent. We went on a kind of a tour with Salem Media with 300 people. I was actually a speaker with Sebastian Gorka. And so I was first exposed to Israel And I thought, wow, you actually do feel like you're in the land of the Bible, which is itself interesting because these days, you can go to Copenhagen and Zurich, and cities in the world have increasingly come to resemble each other. So they've lost that kind of touch with even their own ancient past, but not Israel. But what really struck me was the biblical archaeology. And I've written 3 books on Christian apologetics, so I'm actually quite familiar with the field, but I didn't know much at all about archaeology. And so this to me was very eye-opening. I made a mental note of it. I said, someday I'd like to do more on this. It wasn't until later, after October 7th, Jonathan Cahn's book, The Dragon's Prophecy, that I got the idea of pulling all these threads together into a single sort of documentary tapestry.
Because the one thing, look, I lived September 11. I ran from the buildings. That's what sort of inspired me to make all those immigration films. And I always say to people, you can't get what happened on 9/11 from watching a video or seeing it on TV. It was so different in real time being there. Same thing with the Grand Canyon, right? You go to the Grand Canyon, you look at it, you say, wow, pictures never really got this thing the real way. Going down to the border, when I threw all my stuff at the border, there's a difference of when you watch cartels smuggling people on TV and then you're standing 50 feet away from it and your heart's beating through your chest. And what was the other thing I thought of when I was watching the film and watching you go through Israel? I said, you know what? I can feel that you really felt like you were in such an overwhelming religious, faith-based location. And that was not acting. I mean, that was you really showing how you felt.
Yeah, I think part of the reason for it is that throughout my life, I have heard these scenes from the Bible. So I'll give you one example that's not in the film. And that is the famous scene of David and Bathsheba. King David comes out of his palace and he looks down and he sees this woman, semi-nude or nude, bathing, Bathsheba. Now, on the face of it, this seems like a very odd scene because, I mean, seriously, in the ancient world, a woman bathing in the nude where other people can, see her, it seems kind of unbelievable. However, when you are in Jerusalem, you notice that the ruins of David's palace, which, by the way, has now been found, was found about 2008, 2005, about that time. If you're standing on the palace, you notice the palace is up on a hill. You notice that even now, when you stand there and you look across the hill, you see all these homes, by the way, mostly Arab homes, embedded in the hillside lower down. The homes are in the old style and they have these terraces. You almost feel like you're in Jerusalem, 3,000 years ago. And the point is this, that a woman on a terrace bathing in the nude would only be visible to the man in the palace. Nobody else could see her. And so you suddenly get an idea, this biblical story springs to life. Here's David. He had the only vantage point where he could look down at the top of all these homes. And someone who thought that she was in private was in fact observable by the king. So this is a small vignette that shows you kind of how the Bible springs to life in that place. And you feel like you are walking the footsteps, not just of history, but also the footsteps of Jesus and of the great prophets of the Bible.
That was one of the things in the film, too, how you made the connection to how the things that are written in the Bible have and appear to be coming to be. They're coming to fruition. I love the way you sort of tied that together. So I have a question for you. I'm assuming you're familiar with Brigitte Gabriel from Act for America? Okay.
Yeah.
So I just interviewed Brigitte yesterday, and we were talking about Jews and a lot of the anti-Jew verbiage and feelings that are going through the country, especially now on the conservative side. And I asked her if she believes that, let's use Iran for a moment. If the youngsters in Iran right now who are rebelling against, the Ayatollah, if they take over and they're a more moderate Islam, or even if they give up Islam, they don't have to necessarily go to Christianity. But in their pursuit for more freedom, will they lose the hatred for Israel? And if they do, will the rest of the region lose that hatred? And can the Israeli people live in peace in Israel? She said, Jews will never, ever live in peace because the Prophet Muhammad, when he was dying, said, if you find a Jew, even if he's hiding behind a tree, kill him. So do you agree with her, or do you think that there is hope that the Israeli people will one day be able to live in peace without worrying whether or not the world, the Muslim world, is going to try to take it out every second?
Well, that's a heck of a question, and there's some nuance to it. Let me answer it this way. I do think that there is something spiritually diabolical about anti-Semitism. Since the movie, I've been on a number of these Israeli podcasts, sometimes with secular Jews. And I ask them, I go, what do you think is the reason for anti-Semitism? And you know their answer? They're like, beats me. I have no idea. They're like, I'm scratching my head all my life about this. And what I get from that is that even though anti-Semitism has some kind of secular explanations, like the Jews are very successful, people are envious of the Jews, that secular explanation is insufficient. It's not wrong. It just doesn't get to the full of it. And I think that the full of it requires a spiritual dimension. So I would answer this way. It's very interesting that these people have been singled out wherever they are. By the way, even prior to Islam. And so I think Brigitte is right, but not just because of what the Prophet Muhammad said. I think Brigitte is right because the devil himself has targeted the Jews. And they get it wherever they go. Now, it's true that in the contemporary world, and certainly for the past 100 years or so, their main tormentors are indeed these radical Muslims. And they do, in fact, take their instructions from the Quran. They see themselves as the most devout of the believers. So I think that this means that the troubles for the Jews are going to continue, at least if the Bible is to be believed, until the end of time. Now, this is not to say that you can have periods of abatement, periods of up and periods of down. And so they could be an interregnum of prosperity. There could be a period of peace. So I'm optimistic on the practical sense and for the short term. But if you were going to ask me for my kind of long-term view, like, will this problem ever be like totally solved? I would say that no, since I believe the Bible, I don't think it will be.
So staying in this same bucket, but sort of moving over a little, the person who's listening to this, right, whether it's on X, Facebook, or wherever, I could read the comments now. This will air tomorrow. The comments are going to be, boy, Dinesh, did you just get your $7,000 check for that one? Where do you think that is stemming from? Who started this campaign to really make it appear as if the Jews are buying everything and everyone in the United States of America, including somebody like yourself who is not holding back, especially making films and what it is you just said, or even somebody like myself. I'm not pro or anti-Israel. I really love to be America first in the sense that I think only about America. But at the same time, I'm not going to blast the Jews like I do the Muslims. So I will get all right, Dennis, maybe you're getting a $3,500 check, but who started that $7,000 check thing, Dinesh? Do you know who the villains are?
I'm not sure. I mean, look, here's the funny thing. I've been in public life now since the early 1990s when I wrote my book, Illiberal Education. I started making films in 2012. You're familiar with my first one, Obama. In all this time, 30 years, 35 years, I have barely mentioned the name Israel. Right? So my whole career, I'm now, in the latter part of it, has been Israel-free, which clearly shows I'm not obsessed with Israel. It's not even my main topic at all. So I talk about it now in part because I have a film about it. I do feel a spiritual attachment to Israel, but I don't feel a political attachment to Israel because it's politically quite alien to my politics. I was born in India. America has become my kind of adopted homeland. And so my political interests are completely here. The other thing about it is because of my interest in biblical archaeology, I decided to become, my wife and I, donors to the City of David, which is doing some of the work. But we're interested here not even in the Old Testament. We're interested in archaeology that bears upon Jesus. This is the road. This is the pool of Siloam that Jesus bathed in. This is where he healed the blind man. This is the actual stones on which he walked to the temple. So that stuff, I think, is very interesting to Christians around the world, and also pretty persuasive to skeptics, because suddenly you begin to realize that the Bible is not like other ancient religious documents. The Bible has a deep archaeological and historical corroboration. I mean, you can't do this to the Quran or to the Bhagavad Gita. You can't go find those people and find those locations. But with the Bible, you can. And even very minor figures in the Bible, barely mentioned. You know, in the 19th century, skeptics would say, well, the Bible was written hundreds of years later. It was written by people who didn't have any familiarity with these events. And if the events even happened, they embellished, they made up. But you'll have a minor figure in the Bible, a kind of sidekick, let's say, of the king, who is sent to go keep an eye on the prophet Jeremiah. This is, by the way, in about the 6th century, 7th century BC. And suddenly a seal comes out of the ground, a clay seal, which was used to stamp documents or to seal documents, and it has that guy's name on it. Turns out that's a real guy. You know, it happens to be a guy named Jehukal, son of Shelemiah. Nobody living hundreds of years later would have heard about that guy. You'd never be able to accurately call it. You couldn't have made it up. It was obviously done by somebody very familiar with the situation at the time, with inside information, you could say. So anyway, we became donors of the city of David. So if I look at my, checkbook, so to speak, I would have to say that not only have I never been on Israel's payroll, but Israel has been on my payroll for at least 3 years.
So, see, my feeling is, and I don't know if we talked about this when you had me on as a guest, but my feeling is that the Muslim world, be it Qatar, Saudi Arabia, that they finally figured out that the way to fight fire with fire is that they're going to use their money, their donations into the college system, whether it's the Ivy League at Columbia or wherever it is. I mean, $8 billion to control the narrative there on our youngsters to create a hatred for Israel and that America sucks. And I think they realize that the greatest way for them to eliminate Israel is to divide the America and the Israel relationship. And so if they can do that, if they can build that division, it makes it easier for them to actually end the days for the Jews. And so for me, Dinesh, it may be a little out there in terms of the theory, but I feel as if you were to follow the money going backwards, you would see it goes back to the Muslim countries within the Middle East. And obviously their conduits here with places like CARE, Al Jazeera, whatever it is. And they have been funding this push for the anti-Jew conversations that have been led in large part by Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes and other people like that. So that's my take on it.
Well, you're making a key point. The money that is pro-Israel in the United States, by and large, comes from rich Jews in America. It doesn't come from Israel. In fact, Israel, if you ever deal with the Israeli government, is notoriously cheap. Part of the Jewish stereotype, right? Yeah. Now, the Muslim money is not local. If you think about the money that Qatar has put in, for example, I read a report that they gave $1 billion to Georgetown University. I think one university. I mean, you can buy a political science department for that kind of money. And so here you have on social media, like, you're getting $7,000, and you're missing the big picture, which is that for the Qataris, it's not about paying some influencer. Their idea is, how do I own like Paramount Studios? How do I buy a massive media outlet and control all its content? How do I buy a whole group of politicians? And if there's anything vulnerability in our political system, and this is not a partisan point at all, is that our politicians actually go pretty cheap for the most part. And what I mean by that is that, let's say you in America, this applies whether you're American or foreign, you have a problem of some sort. Let's say you want to talk to your local congressman, you don't know the guy. The simple truth of it is, take out your checkbook, write a check for $10,000 and mail it to his campaign or to his PAC. And then 2 weeks later, He'll call you. You don't even have to call him. He'll
That's
call
right.
you.
That's right.
And so the truth of it is that these foreign countries have figured out that there are ways to buy influence in this country, and they're going about it. So that doesn't really surprise us. What I think is surprising and very notable is the magnitude, the ocean of Muslim money. And it's going to, I mean, it's not just going to buy influence, it's going to buy land, it's going to establish mosques. I mean, look at the state of Texas, red state, mushrooming with mosques all over Houston, all over Dallas. They're able to fund people running for school board. They're able to fund people running for city council. One of the guys in the wake of the Mamdani victory said, hey, in America, in 10 years, we're going to have 50 Muslim congressmen. I don't think that's out of the range of possibility. So this, I think, is the issue. If anything that I think makes the Tucker operation and others nefarious, it's diverting attention away from this serious problem.
I'm glad you just brought that up. Because before I go into the last part, I want to talk about you specifically, your career and things that people don't know. I want to talk about Tucker and Megan for a second because we both, I think we both, I mean, I don't know enough about your past, but just remembering, I mean, I think I told you this. I remember Megyn Kelly calling me up one time. This is when Obama was looking to put you into prison. And she said, do you know Dinesh D'Souza? And I said, I've met him once at CPAC. It was real quick. And somebody took a photo of it. And she said, oh, because I see a photo here of you and him. I said, okay. I said, you know, he's a filmmaker. I'm a filmmaker. She goes, would you be willing to come on and defend him on what's happening right now? So I did an appearance with Megan where I was talking about having a target on your back as a filmmaker. And, you know, Fox News for me was everything. Because when I tried to get out my border films, nobody would take them. The film festivals turned them away. Hollywood laughed at me, even though the film was of quality, top quality performance. And the reason being, and I didn't realize it at the time because I really wasn't political at the time, Dinesh, is that it was because they saw it as a righty film. Because instead of saying the poor illegal immigrant, I took it from the cost to the American citizen. So Fox News was huge for us. And the two people who interviewed me the most, I should really say three, Brian Kilmeade, who's the one who got me on Fox News because he used to be my neighbor, Tucker Carlson, back in the mornings when he was on Fox and Friends weekends, and Megyn Kelly. So if you take away Brian, two of the three have completely gone over the edge, and they're no longer the people who I once knew and really liked and emailed back and forth with. I don't know them anymore. And I always believe in Reagan's theory, and I know you do because you used to be a part of the Reagan era, is, you know, never crack down on another conservative or a fellow Republican. But I don't have a choice. I mean, when anybody ever asks me about the two of them, I blast them, which goes against my personality, especially online. But I can't hold back. What the hell do you think happened to the two of them? Because you used to benefit from them as much as I did because they'd love to have you on your program. You, like me, we were ratings grabbers. Why, what happened?
Well, let's separate the two for a moment. Megyn Kelly, and the example you gave is very illustrative of this, was a fierce defender of me during my campaign finance case. She was my big ally at Fox. And I'm very grateful to her because at that precarious time, she was vociferous in standing up for me. I was actually in confinement later, and I would come to New York for a hearing. I'd go on Megyn Kelly's show that night. I remember. It actually made my life in confinement better. I went back to the confinement center, and one of the guards was like, were you just on Megyn Kelly? And suddenly I became like a celebrity, and I got, all this VIP treatment because the guy saw me on TV. So because of that, I've been extremely reluctant to say anything about Megyn Kelly. And in fact, I've said very little about it. Just for that personal note of gratitude, I'm like, I'm going to, all right, I have my issues, but I'm going to maintain a certain decorous silence on Megyn Kelly. Tucker Carlson, I've also known in fact, much longer than Megyn Kelly. Going back to his days when he was like in his 20s, one of his first jobs was at the Heritage Foundation. I was there at the time. I was about to leave to join the Reagan White House. So I knew Tucker since the late 80s. And as you say, with Tucker, I think more so than with Megyn, you have a sort of almost a character implant, right? A transformation. Now, people undergo transformations, and let's say Bill Kristol has undergone a transformation.
Yeah.
But normally when someone makes a U-turn, not just a shift in the road, but a complete U-turn, like Solzhenitsyn, you go from, one side to the other. Whittaker Chambers, I used to be a communist and now I'm a capitalist. I used to be an atheist, a militant atheist, now I'm a Christian. All right, well, normally you're obliged to give some sort of a testimony or account as to how you got from here to there. Notice that Tucker's never done this. He's never said, I used to really like Israel, and then I learned A, B, and C, and these are the reasons that changed my mind. Rather, out of nowhere, Tucker starts praising Maduro in Venezuela, claiming he's a conservative, saying Sharia law is not that bad because who would not want to live in an orderly society? Hamas is not a terrorist group. Even the Groypers, some of them are on my feed like, Dinesh, man, lay off Tucker. I'm like, all right, well, here are the 7 things I've heard from Tucker in the last 2 weeks. Which of these 7 things do you agree with? Dead silence. It's none of them. Even the Groypers don't agree with him. The oldest living Groyper, as Bill Maher calls him. And so they'll say, like, I defend his right to say it, or I defend his free speech. Well, his free speech is not in question. None of us critics of Tucker have said that he needs to be banned or thrown off his platform. We're not saying that, nor have we ever. So the whole thing to me is disturbing and baffling. And cannot even, in Candace's case, look, she's running a freak show, I have occasionally in my career been on these late night shows, generally like at 1 a.m. They're interviewing, quote, UFO investigators or people who claim to be abducted by aliens. There's a market for this, right? The market is insomniacs. It's people with slightly mental problems. But so Candace is going, I think, for that type of audience. But Tucker's not. Tucker, I think, is actually trying to capture the Heritage Foundation. He's trying to capture TPUSA. He's got an in with Vance. So Tucker is actually trying to steer the ship of the Republican Party in a Groyperish direction. I think this is what makes him more menacing than the others.
Yeah, for me, Candace is just a freak show, and I'm not going to take her very seriously. Tucker I take very seriously because I believe at his heart he is a true conservative. And the fact that he is going at this, I don't believe it has anything to do with money. I think it has to do with power. I think it has to do with influence. With Megyn, I'm kind of like you. I didn't have the prison scare, but for me, Megyn really brought my career to the next level. Same thing. I would go to an airport. I would go here. I would go there. Everybody would notice me, ask me for my autograph. I'd get speeches. I'd get paid this. I get paid that. So I really was reluctant in saying anything bad. But then, when she started the stuff with Candace, I said, I don't have a choice because I don't know. I don't remember who said it. Maybe it was Ben Shapiro. He says, hey, at some point your friendship has to go in the back seat, and your country and what is right needs to go in the front seat. When I heard Ben said that, I said, you know what? I gotta take the shackles off. I don't like what Megyn's doing. I think she's a phony conservative. I think she should have just stayed where her lane was as an independent journalist. But now she's trying to become the queen of conservatism because honestly, Dinesh, and you don't have to respond because she did more for you than she did for me. I see her grabbing the low-hanging fruit. So for Megyn, I think it's attention and money. For Tucker, I think it's power and influence. And for Candace, I just think she feels so irrelevant that she's trying to find her place. She's got daddy issues, as I would say. But with that in mind, I won't ask you to say anything more about them. I respect that. I'd rather go into you now. I want people for the next part of the interview here, I want to really go into something. First of all, when Obama went after you, clearly he went after you because of the 2016 film. When When you get the notification that you're in trouble, do you remember where you were, what you got, and how they came to you, and what you felt?
Sure. Interesting. I have never been asked this question, and yet it's a very interesting one. So I was in New York. I was president of the King's College, and unfortunately, my marriage had dissolved. So I was dating this young woman, and so the two of us were in Central Park, and her face kind of goes, blank, and she says, I got a call from the FBI, and I go, what do you mean? And she goes, I think the FBI is going to come to your apartment. And I go, you mean like an FBI raid? She goes, yeah. And so I didn't know how to react. I knew a film attorney who had drafted film documents for the Obama film in Los Angeles. His name was Kelly Crabb. So I call him and I go, Kelly, I've just got this very strange information. And he goes, listen, my partner was a DA. I'm going to go get him. Just hang on. And so he brings in this guy, and this guy tells me, he goes, Dinesh, go to your apartment immediately, take your computer, your passport, any valuables that you have, and go put them in storage. He goes, because if the FBI raids you, they will take everything. And while you will get it back eventually, you may not get it back for 6 months. So if your computer has documents you're working on, they don't care about any of that. So you need to clear out your apartment now. And number two, he says, you need a very good criminal defense attorney like tomorrow. So he goes, I know a guy in New York, Ben Brafman. He's a world famous. He's defended, Puff Diddy and a bunch of big name actors and other figures. He goes, I will call him, and he will see you tomorrow, and he will tell you what to do. So sure enough, the next morning I was in the office of Ben Brafman. And, just to follow the story for a moment, Ben Brafman said to me, he goes, Dinesh, he goes, this is all new for you. He goes, you ran afoul of the law. He goes, it's a minor technicality. He goes, you exceeded the campaign finance limit. He goes, leave it to me. He goes, I will go talk some sense into those guys. He goes, a number of the people in that office work for me. He goes, I assure you, I will be back to you in 3 days. And they will agree not to prosecute you. They will give you a kind of a warning. They might give you a small fine, which we'll agree to pay, and you agree not to do it again. I go, great. But 3 days later, I'm in Ben Brafman's office, and he now is kind of ashen and embarrassed. And he goes, I don't really get it. He goes, I was down there, and they are absolutely determined to push this to the hilt. Of course, what he didn't know, I knew. I told him. I'm like, Ben, this is a political hit. I go, this involves Holder, the Justice Department, Obama. I just made a film on Obama. And Ben's like, no, it's not that. It can't be that. He goes, no, you're high profile. These prosecutors are ambitious. They're trying to make a name for themselves. Over time, Ben Brafman, Democrat, New Yorker, came to realize it absolutely was a political prosecution. And later, Ben sent me a very touching note, and he basically goes, man, he goes, you were right from the beginning. And he goes, it's been a political education for me to see this kind of a political hit carried out in practice. And of course, this was long before, Carter Page and Papadopoulos and Michael Flynn and of course, Trump. So looking back, my case was the very earliest of this lawfare that we are now all too familiar with.
Where did they come and get you? Did they come to your apartment?
So they, sure enough, hours later, the FBI was banging in my door. Now, interestingly, I'm used to the untouchables, and I'm used to like these big guys with sunglasses. These were two like nerdy, college grads, like 3 years out of college, and they were very wimpy, and they were like, may we come in and speak to you? And of course, I knew enough to say, no, I don't really have anything to say. And so they politely left. The actual indictment didn't come until some weeks later. But Ben Brafman took me in. They didn't come and quote get me, but they did put handcuffs on me when I got there, and so I had to go through the full rigmarole. Humiliation is part of what they're going for here, and really their goal. You always have to think about what the end goal of all these things are, because that helps you to fight it. Their end goal was simply this, as it was with Trump, by the way, to destroy your career, to remove you as an influential figure. And so I said to myself, if I come out, the confinement itself and so on. In fact, I called a friend of mine the day before I went into 8 months of confinement. And I go, I'm a little anxious about all this. And my friend, actually my best friend, laughs and he goes, Dinesh, you'll be fine. You grew up in India. So I had to laugh heartily. And in truth, I was fine. But I said to myself, if my career at the end of this is ruined, they will have won. If on the other hand, it survives, I go on to make other films, I go on to write other books, then I win. And so that's kind of the way I looked at it from the beginning.
When we've all been subjected to bad news, right? And so when you hear your girlfriend tell you, I think the FBI is going to raid your place because I assume they called her.
They called her to get information on me.
Yeah, exactly. So when you hear that, I mean, was there a pit in your stomach? That feeling of getting bad news? Were you kind of shaken at the core? Or did you kind of blow it off a little bit in the sense that, things will work out. It's just another hill to climb?
No, I took it very seriously. It did hit me hard. It hit me more, I think, because I was, when I came to America at the age of 17, it's important to know I came alone. I didn't come with my family. Most Indians who have come, with their families. Your dad's a doctor. So you have that infrastructure of family support. But because I came alone, and to this day, my family is, back in India, I felt, at least in my younger years, not now, a sense of vulnerability. And so when I heard the FBI is coming to get you, I thought, I do know what the full force of the U.S. government feels like. And so, later the case would be called United States of America versus Dinesh D'Souza. And that summarizes it kind of right there. So even if you're a native-born American, unless you just come from one of those families that's has infinite resources, and you by and large, you're going to feel that anxiety that regardless of what the case is about, they have the ability to annihilate you. So you feel that sense of kind of nakedness. And I felt it, I would say, at 3 or 4 stages. Now, at each point, I was able to get back in the saddle and recover my strength and recognize, okay, well, you know what, I do have this. I mean, even in my case, I had to say to myself, I'm not a January 6th defendant. No, I walk into Ben Brafman's office. He's like, write me a check for $250,000. Well, I could do it. I also had Ben Brafman. I had Megyn Kelly. So I had allies. Now, interestingly, I knew a number of prominent liberals because I'd lived in D.C. I was part of a think tank world where people who wrote for the New York Times, the New Republic, were people I knew. I would see them in Trover Bookstore. I would go to receptions where they were there. And these are people who would come up to me and say, oh, man, Dinesh, you're really being shafted here and stuff like that. And I'd be like, well, EJ, you write for the Washington Post. It'd be really nice for you to say that. Megyn Kelly is defending me. Some conservatives are defending me. But for you to defend me in the New York Times or in the Washington Post would mean a lot. And then they'd be like, and, they wouldn't do it. Yeah. And then I realized that, and, we're talking a little bit about friendship. Then I realized, well, these people are not really my friends. And they're not even honest people because I'm not asking them. I'm not the one who told them I'm being shafted. They're telling me I'm being shafted. So I'm just telling them to write what you already believe. And you just told me out of your own mouth. And they're like, I can't do it. So I'm like, you know what? In fact, this was a big reason why I sort of shifted my career, where I spent less time trying to convince these sitting on the fence centrists and liberal-leaning intellectual types. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to focus really on the ordinary American who may not have gone to Yale, but really wants to know about the American form of government, really wants to learn about the history of the Democratic Party. I'll spend more of my energy focusing and educating that guy than trying to convince some, Ivy League grad who writes for the New Republic that he should be on board with, let's say, supply side economics.
When you were making 2016, the Obama film, and I know it was based on your book, but did you ever think that there was going to be a political price to pay? Did you ever, or did you get so caught up in making the film and knowing that it was going to be a blockbuster? What was your thinking then?
My focus was not on the risk of retaliation. It was just on the risk of making the film. So, for example, I didn't just go to Kenya and interview, Obama's brother in the slums. I went to Obama's family homestead in Kogelo. This is like going into some, village in North Vietnam, very remote, and it's a tricky environment over there. I, in fact, had a guy we had hired from the South African embassy who was my guard. And this guy would be like, okay, if you check into a hotel, he goes, I'm in the next room. And there's he put a connecting thing where he could jump from his balcony into my balcony and enter my room if needed. When I interviewed George Obama, this guy told me, we met at the Hyatt Regency. He said, George Obama's a gangster. He goes, listen, you're not going to be safe with this guy. He's going to come with 10 guys. He won't come alone. And so he goes, you will be sitting over here. George Obama will be sitting over there. He goes, I will be sitting with a gun like 20 feet away at a different table, and I will have my gun aimed at George Obama. And so this was the environment in which that film was made. We were worried about them confiscating our footage, taking our film, not letting us leave the airport with the footage. So we had to kind of smuggle the footage out of there. So I think what happened is my energy was so focused on the pitfalls and risks of making the film that very stupidly, I have to admit in retrospect, I completely missed the big target on my back that would come from a vindictive narcissist named Barack Obama after the film. That risk, I must say, I was completely blind to.
So, I mean, you got 2016, then you did Hillary's America. The 2020 film, The Mules, I thought was phenomenal. I thought they were all phenomenal. So the question is that from a film perspective, I think I have more questions that you've probably never been asked before because of where I come from. I am so curious as to when you decided to make your film. I mean, you're coming from a writer to a filmmaker, and that's not necessarily the easiest transition. So do you find today when you're making a film that you've learned so much in the prior films that it's easier for you to make a new film, or do you find it now that you're getting old, and you and I are on the older side of the because filmmaking is really a young man's game, right? So we're on the other side of 50. Do you find these films to be more challenging and harder because of your age? Money is always an issue, raising money for films, because really there's no distribution anymore, right? I mean, you got to go through hoops to get distribution. Kind of give us a little bit of color on that.
Well, the film genre is very different than writing. In a book, you are going to unfurl your argument like a legal brief. It's like the opening of a legal case where the prosecutor stands up and goes, listen, I'm going to be proving this and this and this and this. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to show you this and this and this and this. So you're revealing at the outset the conclusion. You're like, that guy over there did it. And I'm not going to show you in my statement how he did it, why he did it. So a book very much follows that type of, I'm going to prove it to you script. A film is not like that. A film is a journey of discovery. So in the beginning of the film, you have a problem. think of a crime film. There's a murder, and you're like, who did it? So the film then takes you on a kind of journey to find out the twists and turns, the suspense, the buildup, the climax. So a film is a sort of a disclosure, an unfurling. And so you have to learn that you have to get out of the writer mode. You have to take something that in fact, you know the conclusion because you're making the film, but you have to pretend you don't.
Right.
And so you start the film by going, we have a real problem here. And then let's go find out how we can solve it. And so I got to go to, I'm trying to learn about Obama. Well, okay, guess what? Let's start off in Hawaii. That's where Obama started. And then let's go to Indonesia. I go to Indonesia. Let's go to Kenya. I go to Kenya. So I'm following the life of Obama to discover things about him. And in the film is a little bit of a pretense because I'm pretending like I'm learning along the way. Even though I've, of course, plotted out the film, I know where I want to go in each of these places. I've already written a book about Obama. But making that shift from one genre to another, it was difficult for me at first. It comes natural to me now. It's almost like I'm bilingual. If I write a book, I go into the book writing mode. If I'm making a film, I'm in the film mode. So it's much, much easier because I understand. And of course, there are so many pitfalls in the film business that you have to learn that can be very, very costly and have actually cost me a lot of money, like the painful experiences along the way. Having to do with people blocking you and, people pulling your film from the theater, Amazon, suddenly making your DVDs unavailable right in the throes of when the film is new and you've spent a lot of money to promote it and people are buying DVDs left and right. And suddenly they go, DVD unavailable, will ship in 2 months. Wow. They do this kind of stuff. So even though we don't have like digital censorship of the kind we had in the Biden years, a lot of these types of shenanigans still go on.
They do go on. So do you find it, how old are you, Dinesh?
I turned 65 this year.
Wow, I would have never guessed 65, really? I mean, you
still got all my hair, and so I'm fooling the public, but maybe not much longer.
Listen, you and me both, that's the one thing. I think it's our hair that does it, right? But that said, so at 65, are you thinking of winding down, or do you feel like you're only just winding up?
No, I think the right way to do this, I've thought about it a lot and watched other people over the years. I think the answer to this is that in my 60s, certainly the second half of my 60s, my idea is to wind it back a little. My son-in-law is a congressman. My daughter is now intimately very involved in politics. I'm going to let them, deal with the day-to-day rigmarole of it. In fact, I'm not even going to continue my daily podcast. I'm going to start a new weekly show. So that's a classic example of how I am. Now, I'll put more into the weekly show than I did in the daily show. But the simple fact of the matter is I'm not in the 5-day-a-week grind the way I used to be. And my idea, again, is I'll write books, but I probably won't write them one a year the way in the kind of productive phase of my career, I was like, working nonstop, and my productivity was insane. One time I met George Will, and he's like, Dinesh, I always thought there were like 5 of you, because he's like, I just turned my head and there's another book out, or there you are giving speeches here and there. And he goes, how do you do all this at one time? Well, I'm not trying to maintain that kind of pace anymore. So my idea is that it is important to come to terms with the phase of life you're in, not give up your productivity, because I enjoy what I do. If I didn't, it'd be a different matter, but because I do, my idea is to keep it up, but keep it up at a more measured pace.
So then let's go into this then, and as I start to wind down here. So if guys like you who are making films and big books, if you're going to start to slow it down and sort of handing it off to the younger kids, myself as well. I mean, I don't go out and do films anymore, especially, I was doing I got on Amazon, my last border film, and I did a homeless film. I mean, I'm going into the homeless camps. I mean, it was dangerous. It was dirty. I mean, I felt like I had to scrub myself 10 times. I just don't have the will to do that anymore, I guess because of the danger and the physical attribute to it. Plus, it takes so damn long to make these films. And in today's environment, you just said it yourself. I mean, even if I was George Clooney and you were Brad Pitt, you still got a distribution issue, right? It's always Netflix and Amazon. The days of having popcorn, it's only a Tom Cruise movie brings that in. So if a newer kid is coming up and says, hey, I want to be a Dinesh D'Souza, or I want to be a Dennis Michael Lynch, and I want to do films, would you say go more towards the Nick Shirley way of doing it, where you just got a little GoPro, a little $500 microphone, and run around and do selfies? Or is there still a platform for guys like you and guys like me who want to make an hour-and-a-half film with editing and music and, like you just explained, a start, a pinnacle, and a finale? Is there still a way to do that? And what would you advise those kids? Also, another thing to ask is, and I'm not asking for your magic sauce, but you've been very creative in the last few films on how it is that you raise the financing for it. So if you can, I'll give you the 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, no interruptions, just diarrhea of the mouth. Boom, throw it out.
The money is always difficult. It should be said that the reason it's difficult on our side, it's not difficult on the other side, by the way. If Michael Moore wanted to make a film, he goes to a big studio. He goes, I want to make a film on gun control. They go, here's $10 million. He makes the film, he delivers it, and they go, all right, well, it's going to be released on so-and-so date. And on that day, you're going to be on Jimmy Kimmel. And the next day, you'll be on The View. And the next day on Good Morning America, and on it goes, NPR. They do it all for you. Michael Moore's sole job, by the way, a hard enough job, is make a good film. That's it. Our job is completely different. We have to raise the money. We have to do all the legal work to set up the legal entities that are involved. We have to then make the film, the whole production process, and then we have to go market it. And then we have to distribute it. We have to get it on all the right, and we have obstacles all along the way, because on our side, there is no infrastructure that is even remotely comparable to what I just described with Michael Moore. You have to do it all. The reason that I think a lot of conservative filmmakers fail is because the combination of skills to do those things is very rare. You have people who have money, right? And they'll be like, I'm going to fund my own film. But the guy has money but no creativity. He doesn't even know how to make a film. Then you have creative people who have good ideas, but they're broke. So then they are like, I got a great idea, but I'm like, you can make a ragtag film for 50 grand, but if you want to make a film for the theater, it's going to cost a minimum of a couple of $1 million just to make it look theatrical. And then they're like, where am I going to get that? And I'm like, yeah, beats me. And then even if you have both those things, which generally don't go well together, the financial skill on the one side, the sort of creative skill on the other, even if you have those two, you don't have a name, you don't have a brand, you don't have a market. And that's not, and we haven't even talked about distribution. So this is why it's really hard. It's one of the hardest businesses. And by and large, the best promise I make to investors is I basically say to them, listen, for me, this is what I call recycle philanthropy. If you give me $100,000, I will work really hard in the market, no guarantees, but I will work really hard to get it back to you. Why? So you can give it back to me to make my next film. This way, you're not donating to me year after year, but rather we are recycling the same dollar again and again. So that's been my business model. You can see, interestingly, it's more cause-driven than a model. I would not start this business if I was trying to make $100 million. Not at all. So that's not been my primary motivation. A couple of my movies have been runaway successes, and so they have, in fact, made a lot of money. But most of my movies, my investors are reasonably happy if I get them their money back.
Got it. So what would you tell somebody who's young, who's 23, 24? Do they go the Nick Shirley direction and just try to, look, if you and I were going to make a film about Minnesota Somali fraud, you would have gone to Somalia, filmed Somalia, how it all happened, come back, right? We would have done editing and music and Nick Shirley just takes just takes his camera, goes out, and he's shooting stuff, and it's watched 100 million times. He's probably made a couple of $100,000 on the money that he gets from X and YouTube, and God bless him. Would be your advice, or would you say, nah, you got to figure out how to make a movie?
Well, I would say that it's true that in the old days, the short 90-second video had a name. It was called the trailer, and the goal of the trailer was to get people to go watch the movie. So the trailer didn't have value in itself. The trailer was a mere marketing device for the film. We live in an age where the 90-second video has intrinsic value in that it can be monetized on social media. And so lots of people will go the easy route and will make 90-second videos. It's obviously easier to make a 90-second video than to make a 90-minute movie. It's also much more difficult to hold people's attention, particularly today, for 90 minutes. And so the question is it worth it? Is it worth the effort? And so because the risk is much greater, think about it. You spend a year on a movie, right? If you make a video that bombs, you're like, well, that's what I did last Tuesday. But if otherwise you're giving up a year of your life. And it could be also in today's era, let's say you make a fantastic movie on a current topic, but it so happens, let's just say the topic is immigration. Obviously a relevant topic, people are talking about it. But in the week that your film comes out, China invades Taiwan. Your film is dead in the water. You will not get on any shows. Everybody's talking about Taiwan. They're going to keep talking about it for 3 weeks. Your film just happens to be out. Obviously, you had to schedule your film in advance because it's in theaters. And so you're doomed. You just have to accept that that's just the way it goes. And I've had to come to terms with that, and that's happened also, by the way, with a couple of books that I've done. But I always console myself and say, well, all right, well, you know what? Let's take the latest film, The Dragon's Prophecy. This film happened to be more timely when it came out than even when I made it. All the swirling controversies involving Tucker and Candace came out actually after I finished the film. The film just jumped into the middle of all that. So essentially, it's like you win some, you lose some.
I gotcha. So last question, and then I'll let you go. I appreciate your time. When I look right now, and I look at the conservative, they call it a movement. I never like that word. I think conservatism's always been around. There's just waves of how it is. But when you look at this conservative movement, you got Dan Bongino, who, had risen to the top, goes to the FBI, doesn't get a whole lot done in terms of what people are expecting. Now he's trying to come back and rally the troops. You got Megan, Tucker, and Candace in one camp. You got other people in other camp. TPUSA seems to try to find their footing without Charlie Kirk. Do you see the conservative movement or people coming back together again? Or are we going to remain splintered? And if we do remain splintered, what will that do to us? And if we do come back together, what will be the bind that draws people in?
This is a good question. Let me flash back for just a moment to the Reagan years, because the intellectual foundation of Reaganite conservatism was actually laid before Reagan. Reaganism preceded Reagan, interestingly enough. It later took on the name Reagan, but the intellectual movement was in the 70s. And Reagan, of course, was elected and took office in early 1981. Now, the reason that the movement now, the MAGA movement, is sort of rudderless is because it lacks that intellectual anchor. In fact, it lacks intellectuals at all. If you were to go down the list and think of people who are original thinkers, and by original thinkers, I mean wholesalers rather than retailers. A retailer just takes the wholesale product and sort of distributes it. And most influencers are in that sense, retailers. But who are the wholesalers? Who actually comes up with original thoughts, ideas, connects dots together? Off the top of your head, you'd have to say, in today's environment, I can think off the top of my head, I guess Victor Davis Hanson does a little of that, maybe Jordan Peterson. But you stop at name number 3 or 4. That's it. And then you got to go to then you're basically talking about like Bannon, which is a whole different category. So we don't have that. Part of the anomaly was that a lot of these people who are smart became never Trumpers. And because they're arrogant jerks, even when they were proven wrong about Trump, they dug in and refused to say, all right, well, guess what? You know what? We really called this one wrong. They just kept going. And now they're gone. So I do think, my new show, I've been trying to think about it and think that what we have are these big podcasts, and each of them has a kind of lane. So Candace Owens has like the midget bowling lane, the freak show lane, right? Right? That's the lane. I mean, there's people, there's an audience for midget bowling, right? So Tucker has a lane. They have a lane. I think that there is a big lane that is unoccupied. And that is a lane that in a very engaging, edgy, but intelligent way takes on big topics, but gives them texture and depth, and is not deranged, is open to different points of view, is willing to hear out the argument for and against Israel, is perfectly willing to examine AIPAC, but is also willing to migrate off of politics occasionally. And so that's kind of my model for the new show. Again, all these things are supply side economics. I'm going to make a new product, put it out in the market, see what happens. See if I'm right, if my intuition is correct that there's an audience for it, and the answer is we'll see.
Do you think that sort of program would be the glue to bring the conservative people back together again? Because let's say, for instance, just using bigger names, let's just say you had Dan Bongino, who's going completely hard pro-Israel. You got Tucker Carlson's going really hard anti-Israel. There are two of them. They're colleagues in a sense that they both were Fox, and you're going to sit them down and you're going to be the guy in the middle to kind of say, hey, let's do this debate and figure out who's right, who's wrong. Or maybe even better than Dan, you bring back in Ben and Tucker, and now you're trying to have a three-way triangle of real thought to bring people back together. Is that what you think it's going to take?
So I think that the way to proceed is not so much, because these guys, we are also in an age of proprietorship. So Tucker would never agree to come on because he wants to keep it and stay in his silo. He wants to sort of get the hits. So my way of handling a topic would be this. I would take, some of the things that are said, let's say, for example, about Israel. Netanyahu knew in advance about the October 7th attacks. He actually called for the troops to stand down because he stood to benefit politically. So my point is, I take that straight to Netanyahu. I cross-examine him using the arguments of Matt Gaetz and Bannon, and I press him on these kinds of topics, and I make him answer. So the way to do that is then people realize that, look, although I may have a point of view, I'm willing to engage on all angles. And so, look, I'm not claiming that a single show becomes the kind of healing mechanism. I'm simply saying we just don't have that kind of open-minded, like take Tucker, for example, right? Has Tucker had, except for the ambush on Ted Cruz, a single articulate guest on the other side who would challenge him on all these things that he's saying? No.
Not once.
Not once. Let's say he wants to talk about World War II. Would he consider having like a Richard Evans or an Andrew Roberts? I mean, world-class historian. He would never dare because that guy would make him look like an idiot.
Yes.
And he doesn't want that. And so he'll find some shady historian. And I think the other thing about Tucker is that, which I think is very disingenuous, is he has a strong point of view. But he pretends like he doesn't. He pretends like he's, quote, just asking the questions. And therefore, he gets to play this routine, which is now almost comical, where he crunches up his head and he's like, I don't really know. And, well, that's very interesting. And we haven't heard that before. And so he acts as if he is the recipient of these new revelations even though he had these views from the beginning, he found a guest to actually say what he already thinks. So the whole thing is like staged.
Yes.
It's staged realistically, which is why he gets away with it. But for people who observe Tucker carefully, you can see that this is also in its own way a shtick.
I hear you. So, I mean, a quick yes or no. Do you think the conservative people come back together soon or no? Do we do it in time for the midterms? Is the midterms and losing Trump and the MAGA movement in terms of being able to get things done, is that enough to bring people out? Or are we going to watch this guy have to be impeached again because everybody is infighting and nobody can find a message?
In my opinion, the fate of the midterms depends on the condition of the economy and whether people have a general sense of foreign and domestic security. In other words, think about it. Why do we have a government, right? Number one, to protect us from foreign and domestic thugs. And number two, to protect the infrastructure of property rights and reasonable levels of taxation so that we can thrive and prosper. So if Trump can produce some sort of measurable, demonstrable results, which I think is very well not out of the question at all in the next 6 months, I think we'd be looking at a different and a very positive climate for the midterms.
Dinesh D'Souza, I imagine you want people to go to DineshD'Souza.com. They can find all your social media there. They can find the channel to books and movies.
Yeah, that's a really good starting point. And also the film, go to thedragonsprophecyfilm.com. Different types of streaming platforms on there, good places to buy DVDs. And I'm delighted the film had you liked it and found it riveting, and I think other people will as well.
I would highly suggest that. Not only that, it made me want to visit Israel. I mean, I'll tell you, I've never wanted to visit there before. And I said, you know what, I'd like to go see that place. Dinesh D'Souza, I appreciate you in a big way. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate all the time you gave me, and I wish you the best.
Hey, thanks very much.
All right, that's it for me. Listen, it's a Friday, and I hope you have the best weekend. We got a big weekend as a family. We're going to talk about it on Monday to you in part. But until then, stay well. Look for content on TeamDML.com this weekend, and you'll have some of your exclusive videos. Until next time, hopefully it'll be on Monday for Team DML over the weekend. Please, may God bless you, your family, United States of America, and Dinesh D'Souza. We'll talk to you soon.